Welcome to Between Brains, a podcast created by students for students, where we always try to actually talk about the topics that you may think about a lot. My name is Alex, and I will be your host for today. This episode is called Awakening of Free Will and Democracy, and will deal about the happenings in Hong Kong concerning the protests and the current living conditions. Luckily, we were able to get in touch with an actual student from Hong Kong who asked us if he could remain anonymous due to the reason that he will openly speak about his perception of the situation. In the further, we will refer to him as Ron. So, first of all, as I said already, thank you very, very much for participating in this episode. This episode it's called The Awakening of Free Will and Democracy, and we're focusing on the liberating Hong Kong and the revolution of our time. And according to our knowledge, half a year ago, China wanted to integrate an extradition detention law into the Hong Kong legislation. And Hong Kong residents feared that further restrictions from Chinese government and began protesting against the controversial law on the 6th of June, with over 1 million people taking part in the protest. Since then, according to our media, the situation in Hong Kong has escalated and more than 2 million people have taken to the streets. The demonstrators blocked streets, stormed government buildings, the police violence during the protests is very high, and violent barriers also take place on the sides of the demonstrators. So, yes, in this episode, we just really wanted to focus on the opinion of someone who is actually in Hong Kong and can tell us a little bit more about these topics, because we always know, since we're also studying something with media, that it's sometimes hard to prove the credibility of all media reports. So we prepared some questions that we wanted to talk with you about, and yeah, if it's fine for you, we would just start right now. Okay, so first of all, how did it start for you? So when was the point for you when you said that you have to go out and do something?
There are a lot of things that influence our behavior, whether they started in the past or now. Like all of us are pretending everything is fine, but that's not true. For the triggering point, I would say it is definitely the the attack on June 12th on the citizens by the police, which is ordered by the government, and I think it is the point that to push people outside and to demonstrate, to show that the people has the right to speak for themselves. So this is the reason why I have to go out, because as a Hong Konger, this is my right, and this is my motivation to speak out for what is injustice.
Definitely, I think it's very important, and I'm also very happy to see that the people in Hong Kong actually fight for what they believe in and really face this big government of China. But you also mentioned just right now the attack on the 12th of June. How exactly was that attack? How did it go?
It is like because there is a great imbalance of force between the police and the citizens, because like in the beginning, because it is the beginning of the whole attack thing that police brutality starts. Police are starting to use tear gas bullets on unarmed citizens in the subway stations, where the people cannot get rid of the situation real quick, and they all suffer in the chemical weapon. So it's kind of insane and scary situation for all the people, including the innocent one.
When I hear all this, I just ask myself, is there something that can help you? Like, are there any organizations from the sides of the demonstrations, like any big organizations that stand on your side?
Yes, there are some legislator in the legislative council that stand on our side, the pro-democracy parties. Like they will sometimes they will stand in the front line and to trying to cool down the situation for a bit, like the conflicts between the police and the citizens, and they will always be there for some kind of pro-democracy movement. For example, they will during the march and demonstration, they will speak something about the current situation, like what policy the government has adapted to that might influence our lives, and could it benefit us or could it do a disadvantage on us, so something like that.
Okay, so you already talked a little bit about the way how your demonstrations go. Right now, I would like to know these demonstrations. How often do they occur? Is it every day? Is it in the beginning? Was it every day? Or how often can the people in Hong Kong actually go on the streets? And how often would you see them if you are in Hong Kong?
Mm. Actually, there are a lot of fluidity in the progression. Like we don't have exact number or venue for our demonstration. Like we can have it maybe twice a week or for 3 times a week, like and whenever or wherever. So we don't have the
Okay,
exact number or the plan to do it. So it is it is funny
so
because
it's very
uh,
spontaneous.
we are motivated by our value instead of by what accident uh, that do harm on us. Like as long as the value or the reason exists, we will go out no matter the cost.
But additionally, you said that you will keep on going to the streets. What are some of your exact demands? Like, if you could
Mhm.
imagine that I, for example, or you will be able to speak someone from the Chinese government, and you would know, even though that sounds maybe unlogical, but you would know
Mm.
that he would listen to you, and you would have the chance to tell
Mhm.
him, okay, what are
Mm.
your demands? Could you tell
Like
me
uh,
which these
like
were?
for the whole protest, we always stick to our 5 demands. Like there are plenty of slogans that says 5 demands, not one less, to every media on earth. Like for the first demand, it is the full withdrawal of the extradition bill, of course. Like we don't want the law to be reinstalled in the government where that can possibly hurt the rights of our citizens. And for the
Yeah.
second demand, it will be a commission or inquiry, uh, as known as Independent Investigation Council, that is formed by third parties in order to investigate things that are happening on all sides, like the government, the police, protesters, maybe as well as the triad gangs that were involved in the attack in July the
Mhm.
21st of July in the Yuen Long MTR station. And
What
for the
exactly happened there?
Mhm. Sorry, can you repeat?
Yes, of course, no problem. What exactly happened in the 21st of July?
Yeah, it is a very horrible attack on innocent citizens because the time for the attack is around evening, maybe 8 or 9 at night, when people are coming off work from to go to home. And then there is one of the legislator that has a pro-China background. He
Yeah.
he collaborate with some gangs in the northern Hong Kong that to they uh, they beat every citizens they see with sticks. It could be steel sticks or wooden sticks. They beat whoever that get into their sights
Yeah.
with no mercy, and they do it indiscriminately. So basically, they
So,
beat whoever they see. It is very horrible because there are a lot of children, elderlies, and even pregnant women in the station. They
pregnant
but
women.
what yeah, I don't know what have they have done wrong that deserve to be beaten badly. There are a lot of blood and bruises on every person's body. like from the head to the toe. It is not acceptable, and it is not civilized, not a civilized act.
I think that sounds just horrible. Like it cannot
Yes,
get really worse.
and I
But what
want to
you're saying, like if
elaborate
I
more
understand
on
it
this
correctly,
because not only
yeah.
do the gangs invaded the MTR station, like there are police officers that went on a beat to the station, but then they they have done nothing but to leave the station without any noticing or uh, acknowledgement on the gangs. They are it appears to all of the citizens in Hong Kong that uh, police are trying to collaborate with the gangs to suppress who are not in the same stand or in the same point of view as well as the police or the government. You know what I mean?
Yes. So just as for me as a quick recap, if I understand it correctly, what you're
Mm-hmm.
telling us,
Mm-hmm.
as terrifying as it is,
Mm-hmm.
there are additionally to the government, additionally to the police of the government, which is already attacking the
Mm-hmm.
people who demonstrate in Hong Kong. There are separate gangs who specialize themselves in just searching for any bystanders or searching for any demonstrators just to beat them up in the most crucial way you can do it. And
Yes.
now,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and now after these gangs exist,
Mm-hmm.
instead of the government trying to chase them,
Mm-hmm.
they are actually trying to cooperate with them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, police are
Oh my
doing
god.
this because there is no clarification made by the police that
Mm.
um, they are away from the gangs, but they only the chief executive of the police force only say that we don't agree with all forms of brutality or violence. We must investigate or conduct further examination, but then there are nothing to be done for by the police.
Okay, so they actually just tell media that they're going to do something about it, but they're actually not.
Yeah.
Okay.
As
Well,
well,
that sounds horrible.
and
I'm feeling very
for
sorry, Ron.
maybe you wanna know what about the fourth demand? It will be
Yes, please.
the amnesty for arrested protesters. Like throughout the whole demonstration, there are um, a lot of police involved in the arresting uh, the protester who may engage in violence. That, but most of them is non unnecessary and excessive kind of arresting because um, from the digit from provided from the police, they only say that for successful charge of riot or illegal assembly, there are only 20 or 10% of people who got charged for the crime, but then the rest of them is not successfully charged. So it will be a sense of excessive arresting of by the police. So
Yeah.
we decided to ask for amnesty for all arrested protesters because we don't know how severe the crime they committed, and nor
Yeah.
we don't know how police have conducted the charge, whether it is transparent and something like that. So we have to do it for our protesters.
Of course, of
Mhm.
course.
And for the fourth demand would be it is a very clear demand that we demand a dual universal suffrage that all the people from Hong Kong have the right to vote for our chief executive and the legislative council because in the current situation we don't have the right to uh, vote by vote to elect for what who can lead the system of Hong Kong. and most of the case, the chief executive is actually ordered by the Chinese government that if the chief executive is not pro-China, the Chinese government will not allow him to be in such position for the Hong Kongers.
So what you're saying right now basically means that first of all, the people in Hong Kong
Mm-hmm.
don't even have the chance to vote their own government. In
Yes.
addition to that,
Mm-hmm.
it's always completely voted or selected by main China, by the Chinese government,
Mm.
which will never allow to have a democratic or open
Yes.
leader for Hong Kong. So right now, there's not even a slight chance for Hong Kong to be able to receive a democratic leader.
Yes, we don't have the right to vote for our chief executive anyways. Like there is appointed chief executive for all Hong Kong people.
Yeah. Well, that sounds terrifying as well, Ron.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very bad for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some research and I found out that Hong Kong was given back to China in 1999
Mm-hmm. And
with the
1997 is it? Is it? Yeah.
1997. Okay, thanks. And with the condition that they have to remain independent for at least 50 years.
Yes.
And what we can see right now is that mainland China is trying since already some time to always, well, kind of not really wait for these 50 years. And they are kind of starting to get Hong Kong under their control way earlier. What can you tell us about that? Were there like other things China is doing additionally to the law, to the bill they wanted to pass?
As you may know, our government has been appointed by the Chinese government, and this leads to kind of a phenomenon that our government is actually a puppet, like it is always controlled by the Chinese government, and there are a lot of policy and construction that harms the people of Hong Kong. Maybe the most obvious one would be the immigration policy of Hong Kong that that is proposed to benefit the mainlanders, like the people come from the China mainland, and they will. Our government has agreed to provide 150 permit of one-way permit that 150 mainlanders can come to Hong Kong by right.
Yeah.
That can
Okay.
that it is just nonsense because the original immigration policy for Hong Kong is that you have to stay in Hong Kong for at least 7 years. But then under this policy, people coming from China can have the identity of Hong Kong within just 1 year. And on top of that, there is the phenomenon caused by the Chinese comer will affect our it will insert a kind of competition in resources, and it has caused a lot of conflicts with regards to the degree of civilization and also maybe the world will. So this creates a lot of the problems that were exploded to the cause of the protests happening right now in Hong Kong.
What I wanted to ask you, since you were speaking about additional problems that mainland China is giving the citizens of Hong Kong, in the past few years, were there like other sorts of demonstrations that might have been overlooked by the media?
I think for the most obvious demonstration by Hong Kongers would be the march that is regularly held in every June 4th of June, that to ask for how do I say it? uh, like we have to trace back to some history that happened in the mainland China, because in
Yeah.
the 4th of June in 1998, there is a inhumane massacre that happened in Tiananmen Square in China, and every
Yeah.
year a lot of Hong Kongers will go outside and march for uh, uh, independent investigation into the accident, because it
Yeah.
has been a consistent and persistent matter uh, that gives China a thrill at the back, because it is some kind of um, accident uh, that involves human rights and liberty, that the Chinese government don't want the people to talk about it. So every
Yes.
year, the Chinese government applies censorship to the date and the happening in Hong Kong, so that the rest of the world will overlook it. So it will
Yeah.
genuinely lower the awareness.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, that doesn't sound that good. And it kind of really fits to what we have talked before, how China is suppressing almost everything that is happening.
Yes.
And since you're also talking all the time a lot about the violence and about the tendency to get hurt, I would like to know if you in person have actually also already experienced violence
Mhm.
towards police or these gangs, or what you do when you experience this. Is there any kind of way to talk to these people, or is there any kind of way to ask, like, to not get punished by them, or do they just, regardless what you say, what you tell them, really go towards you and
Mhm.
fight you?
Personally, I didn't experience
Okay,
any kind
that's good
of
to hear.
violence that may have been taken by the police or the pro-China demonstrator in Hong Kong. But for me, I have acknowledged some news from my peers that there are a lot of uh, gangs that has been intruding every district, especially in the in the western part of Hong Kong. That
Yeah.
during the date of demonstration and in the evening, uh, there there will always be some kind of assembly of the triad gangs or the pro-China demonstrators on streets that uh, will chase after the pro-democracy or the protester that come that wants to come home, and they will they will use the same method that was adapted in the 21st of July, like the triad gangs do,
Yeah.
and it is uh, it is very absurd, because uh, Hong Kong is supposed to be a land of freedom and rights, and to have gangs and triad members on streets this obvious is not it's just not right, because uh we um it is our value to have kept the bad guys underground instead of having the bad guys on ground. So
Yeah.
uh it is very absurd. I don't know how do I describe it, but every time when the bad guys attack, there will always be blood and
Yeah.
injuries that people are sent to hospital and something like that, and it's just horrible.
Um, yeah, well, after hearing this,
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, like, how often do you speak to your family about these issues, for example, to your parents, and aren't they afraid for you that because you're speaking right now to us, and we heard that penalties are very high, the government threatens you with up to 10 years in prison. So yeah,
Yeah.
how is this topic towards, like, how is it threatened in oh no, let me rephrase this, how is it like dealt with within your family?
For me, I think we are all well aware of the penalties and the possible consequences. But the thing is, are we living life or are we surviving life under the rule of possibly the greatest
Yeah,
tyrannic party, the Communist Party of
yeah,
China? Like our government has had displayed similar mode of managing a city regardless of civil rights, laws, and universal values. Like maybe let me illustrate it by an example. Like as we are
yeah,
fighting for democracy, I'm not sure that we democracy could feed the people well, but it surely ensure that the food that we have is 100% safe. But even if the food is contaminated, democracy still provide you with the right to trace for your laws. But there are a
yes,
lot of things that happen in China that, like the infamous big head baby case, like a baby was diagnosed with permanent brain damage after feeding on a Chinese milk powder for infancies. The father then addressed the case to the court, but sadly, not only did he not get the right judgment, he was sentenced to jail for inciting subversion of state power. It is
that's
just
insane.
simply absurd. Like we wish nothing like that to happen in Hong Kong. Therefore, we still
Yeah,
go outside no matter the cause of our act because, like,
of
uh,
course.
it is not possible for every human being to live under a fear every day. Like, there has to be some solution to address the problem. Like, if the
Yes.
problem still exists, uh, uh, I don't know how do I say it. Our world will be doomed.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's a very important
Mhm.
thing that
And
you
yeah,
guys.
yeah, and it sometimes appears to most of the youngsters that uh, I know the penalty could be very heavy, that we could lose the most precious 10 years of our lives. But if the 10 years of our life can uh, can somehow
Maybe
get
prevent
to get
100
something in
years of
return for the
afterlife.
whole good
Yes.
stake of the society, I think
Yeah.
most of us would think that is very worthy. So yeah,
Yes.
I'm not trying to make it romantic or what, but it is
No, no,
just the
I
real
understand.
case.
It's a
Yeah.
sacrifice that you guys think it's worth to make.
Mm-hmm.
So you were also speaking about living every day with fear, living every day with the feeling of something can happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
So this brings me to the question of how the current situation in Hong Kong affects your everyday life. I don't know if you're a student or if you're already
Yeah.
working somewhere, but
I'm just a
how
student, so
you're a
I don't
student,
have
okay.
much barriers that can get in the way of going to protest. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And your university, is it still open? Is it still
Mhm.
working every day like business as usual, or is it also closing on some days and telling the students better stay home or
Mhm.
take care of yourself, we will stop the classes? How is it going on? How is the whole situation affecting the normal life in Hong Kong right now?
Mhm. For the university lives, it was suspended, I believe, 3 weeks ago, like due to the instability of transportation, because there
Yeah.
are demonstrators that went on streets in the morning to put up roadblocks and to put trash on the major roads to different districts. And starting from then, violence from police and protesters escalates, and then and it further enriched to the university's circle that the principal and the teachers all agreed to have suspended the curriculum and any
Yeah.
possible extracurricular activities.
Yeah. So right now, what you're saying, since 3 weeks, classes officially stopped due to the the high problems which you could potentially face on public transportations.
Yes, yes, and
Okay.
especially
Okay.
like maybe you will know that uh, the police has been shooting tear gas bullets in all districts, and it
Yes, we
kind
saw that in
of
our media as well.
yes, such a chemical weapon has been contaminating the surrounding and the environment of Hong Kong. Like if a normal citizen go out without any mask or protective gear, they will be likely to have breathed in toxic chemicals like dioxins that could uh, do harm to their organs and
Really?
maybe the brain, and it is likely
So
to
what
cause
you're
cancer too.
Oh my God. So what you're saying is actually that the situation due
Mhm,
to the tear gas of the police
mhm.
got so bad that
Yeah.
even though you just want to go outside and walk around, you
Yes.
have to pay attention, you have to have like some kind of mask just in order to protect your health.
Yes. Yes. It is very urgent for us to have taken some kind of precautionary measures to protect ourselves. Like
Oh,
because
then that's just
the
horrible.
police have been excessively using the tear gas that I think until now they have released it at least 20,000 shots of tear gas that in populated districts that people are constantly breathing the chemical. So it is very dangerous
Yeah.
and harming our health.
Okay. Well, that Ron, I don't really know what to say. This just sounds
Yes,
like
this
so
is
bad.
way
It's
out of
hard to imagine.
track that the world progress. Yeah, it's horrible.
And do you know people from China that actually live in China and that could
Mhm,
confirm you what they know about the situation in Hong Kong, or if
mhm,
maybe in China it's even like not even a topic because no one knows, or if in China the people actually think that the people in Hong Kong are bad and they
mhm,
and what the Chinese government is doing is actually justified, or
mhm.
is there any sort of connection you have to the mainland?
Like um, there is different kinds of point of views in China. Like there could be pro-democracy people that live in China, and there can also be pro-China people living in China. Like for some of my friends who has a pro-China background, they will. I think most of the case it is because of the propaganda and the
Yeah,
censorship of uh, Chinese government. They they have been receiving wrong information and subjective opinion from the officials that uh, that makes them feel that the Hong Kong people are trying to get whatever they want, regardless of safety or stability of or rights. But then uh, it is just not true, and but however, I don't know how China managed to do it. Most of the people followed the Chinese government and think that the protesters in Hong Kong are just rioters that damage the society. But then for
okay.
the the pro-democracy ones, they will agree what we have been doing uh, and will recognize our efforts as a attempt to speak for what is right by promise, according to uh, the agreement that was signed in the handover back in 1997.
Mhm. And since you're saying that the majority in mainland China is pro-China,
Mm-hmm.
but despite that, there's still some people who have a democratic mindset.
Mm-hmm.
How, yeah, well, how probable, how
Uh,
likely do you think it is that these people actually also go on the streets and protest for people in Hong Kong?
mm-hmm.
Or would you say it's
Mhm.
completely unlogical and completely not
Yes,
possible to, or
yes,
impossible just to
it
go on
is
the streets in
completely
China?
illogical for pro-democratic people to demonstrate in the streets in China because like there are a lot of ways to monitor or to control the crowd by the Chinese government. Like they have the I forgot the name of it. It's kind of uh, artificial intelligence that can scan your face and your identity.
So
That
like an algorithm.
if you ever demonstrate on the streets, they will have some kind of post measure to arrest you and to put you in jail for treason or some kind of horrible crime. Like this is the effort that the Chinese government has been pursuing to have better control and to remain so-called stability in within the Chinese continent.
Well, I'm just wondering after hearing all this,
Hmm.
the whole world, as well as in my experience when I talk to people,
Hmm.
everyone is wondering about North Korea. Everyone is saying how bad the
Hmm.
circumstances are in this country, but no one really speaks about China. Like
Hmm.
I only got to know about
Yeah.
how bad the suppression is because I got a friend myself here in the city where I study, which is originally from Wuhan, China,
Hmm.
and he is totally against that government. He really doesn't like it, and he told me
Hmm.
how bad it can be and how restricted and censored the whole life in China is.
Yes.
So it's completely crazy for me to experience all these kinds of stories where people tell me that North
Hmm.
Korea is bad,
Hmm.
but China is maybe the biggest and strongest dictatorship we
Yes.
experienced in the last
Yes, it's
maybe
true.
2 or 3
Uh,
centuries.
for me, I would say what makes China
Oh,
less
decades. I'm sorry, I didn't mean centuries. Decades.
dictatorship government is that the Chinese government got a whole ton of money that can lure uh, that can lead the public's opinion against them. That um, like when I have a lot of money, I can make use of my power to have to convince or to have suppress other opinions that go against me. So uh, for me, this such kind of censorship will definitely have an positive effect to have to remaining so-called the power of the Chinese government.
Okay, so basically, in your opinion,
Hmm.
it's just about the money and the power someone can have and how they use it, and that's unluckily a very bad case how China is acting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Ron,
Hmm.
coming back to the protests and demonstrations
Hmm.
in your hometown, coming back of speaking to and about Hong Kong, um, these demonstrations that you see
Hmm.
and that you maybe also attend, I don't know.
Hmm.
Would you say that mostly young people protest, or are there also older people, or is it all together? So is it like a
Hmm.
topic that, despite which age you have, it's important to Hong Kongese people, or would you say it's more like a thing that young generations are doing?
Hmm. Um, for the whole participation thing, uh, that the ones that who usually go outside in person in real life will be youngsters, like people aging from I guess uh, 12
Oh, that's
to
pretty young.
60. Yeah, the people who age within the range will tend to go outside to demonstrate with by their very best effort and power. And for the ones who are less likely to go outside, but then still want to contribute to some extent, they will do it in a relatively peaceful way, like to
Yeah.
put up memos or uh, uh, papers of propaganda things that tells how the government has been damaging or has been controlling our lives in upon the Lennon Wars, in which has been established in every district in Hong Kong. Yeah, and for elderlies, maybe they will just give kind words to the grandchildren to be safe or to be water, like in the demonstrations.
So you were just mentioning these kind of Lenin walls or walls. Can
Mhm.
you elaborate maybe a little bit more on that and explain to us what exactly these walls mean and what they are?
Yes, sure. Like for the function of Lennon walls is to is a venue for people to put up positive comments on the protests, and they can
Yeah.
also put up information about what is actually going on uh, in
Okay.
throughout the protest, because uh, as you have mentioned before, not all the media what all the media has been reporting is the whole picture of the whole protest. So
Mm.
there are passionate people to have printed every possible uh, thing that happened in the protest in paper.
Yeah.
Then they put it upon on the Lennon wall, so that people from all situation or from all backgrounds can get to see what is happening in reality. So it is like some kind of media, but in paper.
So what you would say it's kind of a tool that you guys use in order to raise awareness about things that are going on, but also
Yes.
about putting on inspiring messages just to push yourself and to give yourself a little bit of hope.
Yeah. Mhm.
And since we saw as well in the media how many people are actually protesting within Hong Kong, first reaching the 1 million, then reaching up to 2 million people, seeing how many people actually go into the streets and actually face these kind of suppressions, does this kind of gives you any sort of hope?
Mhm.
Seeing the big amount of
Uh,
people that actually go on the streets, like, does this amount of people give you any kind of hope that you can actually achieve something and have a chance against this big mainland China?
yes, yes. To be honest, I do not have like a strong sense of belonging to Hong Kong before 2019, since I always think that people are Hong Kongs are just cowards who do not speak up for themselves nor for their
Yeah,
future. They tend to
yeah,
lie down and accept the reality. But uh, as soon as the demonstration began, I see the mass citizen flooding in the streets to
yeah.
for the nasty extradition bill, and they have the spirit to continue, even if it costs their reputation, family, relationship, and other delicate elements that matters in their lives. It is like a lighthouse erecting in the stormy ocean, like it
Yes.
stands as a shelter to every soul on earth. Like it, as you if you saw it and if you witness it in person, you will feel that power that will surround you and give you the motivation to carry on. Yeah.
Oh, well, as you're saying, I can only imagine, but
Mm.
as you're telling it, it even sounds like it's a kind of a wave of energy that you can feel when
Yes.
you're on the streets, and
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yes.
this is something very, very important, and I'm glad to hear this. And yeah, well, you could maybe even kind of say this whole protesting and demonstrating was kind of a wake up call for all the people
Yes.
living in Hong Kong to actually
Yes, it's true
start
indeed.
speaking out and do something for their own future.
Yeah.
Well, Ron, I have reached the end of the questions that we prepared,
Mhm.
but I still wanted to ask you if there's anything that you still want to talk about. Is there anything that you want to tell the people that are going to listen to this episode? Do you want to approach them in any way? Just feel free to say anything else that you may still want to mention.
Mhm. Maybe the one last thing I want to mention will be civil disobedience. Uh,
Yeah,
for me, civil disobedience come to my mind that the law is just made by human after all. When injustice come, the people should be awakened and to fight for their rights. For a situation, it will be our protests,
definitely.
and we are using all forms of our very best power to say no to the government as an individual, establishing land walls in over, I believe it would be 80% of the districts.
Yeah,
Like no matter how overwhelming the power the government have, I know that uh, it will still help when we are dead trying instead of keeping silent throughout the darkest times of civilization. Like it is
I
easy to
totally agree.
say never give up, but to get it into
To
practice is
actually do
another
something.
story.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I genuinely would love people to get involved in the demonstration happening in Hong Kong because not only are we doing it for our future, uh, we are also pursuing a value that is very universal. Like, um, are we going to keep s- keep our voice down when it comes to injustice, uh, or should we go fight for our rights that we deserve? So I hope that people from around the world can get the more awareness that could positively influence the Chinese government or our government that uh, it is not uh, a good tool to have control. It is not good to control your uh, citizens. Instead, I would say the government should be afraid of their people because uh, it is their people who make the country a country instead of what who lives in the country that makes a country a country.
Definitely. Well, Ron, I'm totally on your side. Thank you very much for all the informations
Mm-hmm.
you could provide to us. I think this is going to open the eyes to a lot of people hearing this directly from a person speaking,
Mm-hmm.
because it's always a different thing if you read something quickly in the morning on your phone
Mm-hmm.
in the quick news and you can just, yeah, if you want to, you can just scroll it away.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're actually listening to a person speaking about personal experience, speaking about how it actually goes because you live there,
Mm-hmm.
that always has a different kind of impact. So I think it was a very brave thing to do, to openly speak with us about this, and I cannot say thank you often enough because I think yes, it was a very good thing and very brave thing.